Welcome to Beyond the Needle, the Aesthetics Business Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Ruse. I'm a former clinic manager turned digital marketing freelancer, and I've had the privilege of helping dozens of aesthetic practitioners across the UK and beyond grow their business. So I know firsthand just how challenging it can be to build a successful aesthetics practice in today's competitive market. Each week, I'm here to share real, actionable strategies and bring on expert guests to help you level up, attract more patients, and build a standout brand. Let's turn your passion into a thriving business together. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Needle. And today I'm incredibly excited to be joined by someone who is not only a very talented aesthetic practitioner, but also an educator, mentor and advocate for patient safety in aesthetics, Kate Ross. Kate is the founder, clinical director and lead aesthetic nurse at the clinic by LA Ross, where she takes a patient-first approach, focusing on restoration, maintenance and natural results rather than excessive change. She is also the director of Urban Aesthetics Academy UK, where she mentors and trains medical professionals entering the aesthetics industry. Beyond her clinical work, Kate is a leading voice in aesthetic education and safety, having published and co-written research on combination therapies, priming protocols and complication management. She also speaks at international conferences, most recently in China, and is highly sought after as a speaker and educator. But what truly sets Kate apart is her dedication to patient safety and practitioner support. She founded the Nurses Network, an organisation committed to building a stronger, more connected community for medical professionals in aesthetics. Through the Nurses Network, practitioners gain access to mentorship, education, discounts on essential products and treatments, and a supportive space to share experiences and grow their careers. In this episode, Kate and I covered so much about her journey, her approach to training and mentorship, and the importance of practitioner support. But one thing we didn't get the chance to fully explore was the incredible work she does in supporting patients who have suffered from botched cosmetic surgery abroad, particularly in Turkey. Kate runs a dedicated Turkey surgery clinic where she provides urgent wound care, post-surgical recovery support, and in many cases, life-saving referrals to hospital care for patients who have suffered serious complications. Her clinic takes on this work at a personal cost of £40,000 a year, ensuring that these patients who are left without aftercare get the treatment they desperately need. Many of the people she's helped have said that she has saved their lives. So while we didn't have the time to cover it in detail in this conversation, I just want to highlight the incredible impact Kate is having on patient safety, not just within the UK aesthetics industry, but for those who find themselves in crisis after seeking treatments abroad. In our conversation, Kate and I unpack her journey into aesthetics, from clinical nursing to leading in education and mentorship, the importance of mentorship and education in ensuring safer, high-quality aesthetic treatments, how she's working to create a more connected and supported industry through the Nurses Network, how practitioners can build a patient-first, ethical aesthetics business in a competitive market, her insights into combination treatments, complication management, and why she believes education is the foundation of good aesthetics, and how she's grown her business to where it is today and the key lessons and challenges that she has faced along the way. Whether you're an experienced practitioner, a medical professional transitioning into aesthetics, or someone passionate about improving patient safety, this episode is packed with insights, real-life stories, and invaluable advice. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Can't wait.
So excited to talk to you. So, Kate, you've built such an incredible reputation in the aesthetics industry over the years, but take it back to the beginning for me for a second. What inspired you to move into aesthetics initially? And tell us a little bit about your journey and how it's led you to where you are today.
So I think my way into aesthetics was probably different to many. I started off from early years just in business. So literally from the age of 18, ran businesses, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So those businesses were recruitment businesses, healthcare businesses, education businesses, so a bit of everything really, even a bit of retail in the mix. So there was a bit of everything. I did my bachelor's again, was not getting this realization of what I wanted to do. So I went straight into doing a postgraduate degree in education after that at Manchester University, and I kind of left that and just went into teaching. Very quickly, I kind of, within my first year, I was promoted, running departments. And I think why I wanted to go into teaching was always to kind of, I know it sounds cheesy, but to kind of make a difference. And very quickly into teaching, I was kind of pulled away more and more from doing the actual teaching and more to do with the senior leadership. And a few years in, I kind of lost my love for it. But again, feeling a little bit uninspired. A friend of mine who was a nurse and her partner was a GP, they kind of reached out to me and asked me to help them kind of design units of study, because that's kind of what I used to do with EdExcel and AQA as in addition to my teaching role. So I kind of just moved into their clinic for a while and was just kind of blown away with the industry as a whole. But also, I was kind of flooded with ideas of, I wouldn't want to say how I do things better, but how I would like to see that business being run. And that's really where it started. So I moved on to do a master's in nursing, and I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to work in the NHS, which I know is something that a lot of people have an issue with. But for me, it was, and that wasn't my plan at the beginning. But when I started, especially towards the latter part of it, when I was working in A&E, and I remember just feeling this sense of, I think before you work within healthcare, you have this ideology that if anyone is ill, they can be made better. If anything is wrong, they can access that help. And I think I remember working in A&E over, it was actually just before COVID. And I remember we were inundated for a period of about 12 weeks with people who'd had plastic surgery abroad. And our kind of guideline at that point was, to redirect them to where they had the surgery. And we would always be met with this hostility of, well, I had it abroad and I want things to be checked. And I just remember thinking, where do these people go? And that really kind of allowed me to fine tune what I wanted my clinic to be. And that's in that moment I decided that when I qualified, I wasn't going to work in the NHS, but I was going to kind of create a space to help these people. And how I was going to do that, I didn't know at the time. But fast forward many, many years, we now have a CQC facility based in the Southeast. And I'd say it's 50% of what we do is obviously aesthetics, and it's the soul of what we do, and I love it, and it's an incredible industry to be in. I'm inspired by it every day, but I love the fact that I'd never lost my nursing skills, and I've been able to, off the back of that, see patients pre and post, see them in an emergency setting, and work with our plastic surgeons. Over the last few years, especially, I've been able to scrub in and support our plastic surgeons actually in the surgery, as well as looking after them pre and post. So I feel like I've managed to bring it all into what I wanted. So, and also now we've got a service we can offer to people that fits that gap that wasn't there before.
Yeah, and it's something that's so unique and is obviously, very, very needed, and so nice for people to be able to access when they're in that state of, worry, or, something's maybe gone wrong that they weren't expecting and they've got nowhere else to turn to. So yeah, that's really nice. And obviously you've achieved so much over the years. You're a clinical director, you're a trainer, you're a mentor, you're a speaker, and obviously, like you touched on there, you're a big advocate for patient safety. What drives you to keep pushing forward in this field?
I think one of the things I realised at the beginning, obviously before I did my training, was I remember thinking, surely that's not the case. People were coming in having treatments. The process was very much they'd walk in the door, have the treatment, they'd leave. And I remember thinking, how is that done like that? And I think, obviously, we talk all the time about the world of aesthetic medicine within the UK being highly unregulated. But in my eyes, I seen that as an opportunity to kind of regulate ourselves. And, from the early beginnings, I was obviously very aware coming into the industry that, you know, potentially I would be met with, I guess, judgment almost, because I hadn't done my NHS time. And I just wanted to make sure from the very, very beginning that we put patient safety first. And I think it's the application of it consistently day in, day out that matters. Now, when I was on my own, treating patients on my own, doing that is hard enough. But then when you start to grow and advance your team, you then dealt with another set of cards that you have to kind of address, which is how do you police that? How do you make sure things are being done the way they need to be done? So I think my practice definitely evolved over time. Of course, it has. We've got procedures and policies and SOPs in place here that make sure that every single thing, every service, every interaction, every communication is done how it's meant to. We have ultrasound. We've had ultrasound for 5 years, I think. So the small things that we can do, but it's all well and good having a complications policy on the side. It's all well and good having an ultrasound on the side, but it's the application of that day in, day out. And also the learning. I've signed up to various Patreons that are dedicated to complications. And I think even that in itself, I have to allocate time. My diary is so unbelievably busy, but I make sure that I allocate a certain amount of time per week to engage with it. And I think that's the key. I think we all say, people say statements all the time in which, I'm an advocate for patient safety. But my question is then, what are you doing day in, day out to do that? And I think for me, it's been a learning curve. I published multiple publications now in regards to complications. Touch wood, we've never had our own complication here for aesthetics, which it's not anything to be proud of because these things happen, but we have dealt with a lot of complications, and we get sent, I'd say within aesthetic medicine, I'd say on average about 6 or 7 patients a month will come here with varying severities of complications. And we've had some really difficult patients come to the door with complex complications. And, for example, we had a patient who came here after having a rhinoplasty in Manchester. She was having visual disturbance. That was 9 hours non-stop of liaising with Moorfields Hospital, trying to get her an MRI. And it's difficult to, obviously it helps being a CQC facility and all being medical and having the support of our GPs and so on. But what I would say is, it takes a decision, because I think I remember reaching out to a couple of my colleagues at the early beginning for their advice. And a lot of the advice I got was, why are you getting so involved? And my answer was, well, what do we do? Where are we meant to send this patient? And I think in total, it took 9 hours that day to arrange it, and consistently over the next 5 to 7 days, I'd say about 5 hours of my time each day dealing with this. But we got a resolution. It was a positive one. It was a very emotive period of time for her and her family. And I think it's things like that. And I always say it's going batting for a patient, it's going above and beyond. And I think that's what I try and do here. And I think that's what I try and do with my colleagues. I've very much got an open door policy. Every one of my colleagues who's in my area knows they can come here whenever they like, if they need a second opinion, if they need to use my ultrasound, if they just want to bat some ideas away. And I think what I'm trying to say in a very broad spectrum is patient safety is much bigger than just having some training in complications and having an ultrasound. It is the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis and that level of dedication to keeping our patients safe.
Obviously, it's a lot of responsibility to take on when you're seeing, even 6, 7 patients a month is, like you say, you spend hours and hours with this rhinoplasty complication patient. How do you manage that within your, day to day with all of your other patients and running a business and managing a team?
I'd like to say that it doesn't have an impact, but it does. And I make the worst business decisions when it's in light of a complication, because until now, we don't actually charge for our time, which I know all of my colleagues say, you're mental, why do you do that? And I just think we're in a very unique position to be able to help. I'm no Gillian Murray, I'm no Lee Walker, but I am still in a position where I can help. And I think when you are in that unique position, you should offer your services to whatever extent. You know, I think the patient who we seen for the rhinoplasty, I think in total we charged her about £400, which was just literally cover the cost of the medication that I prescribed for her when she was here. So yeah, business sense, it makes none. And but at the end of the day, I always think we are a business, and our business is our brand. And I do think that a part of branding is not necessarily what you sell or how you come across, but it's also how the impact you have on other people and how you make people feel. And if people can come into my practice for whatever service or treatment and feel safe, then that's the intention. And that is what I want my colleagues to think of me as well. So yeah, it might not add to my bottom line, which it certainly doesn't, but that's kind of not why I do it.
Do you think that in a way it does serve your business in a very positive manner? Because obviously you're not doing it because of this, you're doing it because you're passionate about it and you're passionate about the patient safety. But as a result of helping all of these people over time, you're kind of the go-to person for complications. So, you are an expert in your field. You are kind of the go-to place if you want to see someone who really knows what they're doing with aesthetics in a roundabout way. Do you think that that does come back around and serve you?
I think it comes around. I certainly wouldn't see myself as an expert, but one thing that I do know is I do invest a lot in my professional development. But the beauty, I think, of the position that I'm in is the fact that I have a network of professionals around me. I I have incredible colleagues in the field that are incredibly kind and will give me their time if I need it, and they know they'll always get it in return from me. So even though I may not be the go-to person, if you look at it like that, I'm still going to be there. And luckily for me, I have some very knowledgeable and incredible colleagues that I can call on for advice and help. And I always do, because I do believe that dealing with an emergency or dealing with a complication or anything, it's never, you need that team. We need that multidisciplinary team. And I think, I've been in a position where I think we all have, as adults, we've all been in a position where we feel vulnerable. And I think that's key, because when we talk about complications, we all talk about the dramatic complications that get shared on social media. But I think there's a lot to be said for just the fact that a patient feels scared and vulnerable. And sometimes all they need is some reassurance. Now, I can stem back to slightly different context, but, my mom has a highly decorated past of being unwell. She's had illness has not been kind to her. And I feel very blessed that when she presents to me in a certain way, I have the knowledge to assess her and respond accordingly. But there are times in my life where I didn't have that. And I can remember being and doing my nurse training and being in absolute awe. I can always remember, I often talk about this when me and my colleagues, because that's what we do. Everyone who in aesthetic, when we get together, we always end up talking usually about work and our experience in our field. But I can always remember being in cardiology when I was doing my training. And there was an instance when we had three patients arrest at the same time. I was with this particular patient. It was a very complex one. And I can just remember watching the sister who's in charge, who was, and in that moment, the most senior member of staff. And the way she responded and the way she executed, managing three separate, issues at the same time, was absolutely inspiring. And I remember coming home absolutely distraught because of my patient and everything that was happening with her. But on the same breath, just came back with this absolute inspiration of, I want to be her. I want to be that person just that person. And I've always carried that. And I can remember when I was doing my master's training in my final year, and COVID had hit, and watching all these people vulnerable because they're away from their family, they're away from their friends, they're unwell, they're scared, we're all full of PPE, that physical, almost human touch had gone. And I can remember a patient who had Parkinson's, communication wasn't there. It was quite difficult. And you could see how upset he was and how vulnerable he was. And yes, this is not clever. I know it's a bad decision, but in that moment, I took my PP off. I remember sitting down and giving him his medication and getting within that distance we're not meant to get into. Because in that moment, watching him go through that was just, it was just too much for me. I wanted to strip that back, and I didn't even care if I picked up COVID, and I just wanted to be that person in that moment, that person in a small way. So although we talk about all these things that we can be or do, I always say it's just, we're very lucky. I mean, God, isn't that what it's all about? Being able to sit there and go, I did that. I made a difference. That's all I wanted to do when I went into teaching, was to make a difference. And, you know, I get messages now from some of the kids who are now in their 30s who tell me I made that difference. And that's amazing, because actually I didn't realize I did that. But we know we do that when we work in this industry, and we can do that in our practices. We can take someone who's lacking confidence, who socially doesn't feel like they're accepted, or psychologically they have barriers, and we can help them become more confident in their skin. We can help them engage with the world. And yes, that people will say that's shallow, but it has an impact. Women who've had children and we lose our identity a little bit, we can give them back. And I just think, wow, what an incredibly lucky position we're in to be able to be that person.
Yeah, and to make a real change for somebody's life. Yeah, because it is incredible the difference that you can make with treatments and that to someone's confidence. You know, if they've been dealing with, you know, acne scarring all of their life and they're, you know, hate their skin and they hide away from the camera, and what a difference you can make if you actually help them overcome those issues. And just going back to safety for a second, what do you think is missing in the way some practitioners approach patient care, and how can we do better as an industry?
I think it goes both ways, because at one point I remember thinking that certain individuals perhaps didn't appreciate the risks, and almost that ignorance is bliss concept. But then I think there are also practitioners who are consumed with that risk. And it's a difficult one. It's the same thing we discuss all the time. It's sometimes we need to do things in order to get a change, and that could be a treatment in a medical facility. You know, if we're unwell, we have to have a procedure. That procedure may not be a nice one, but on the other side of that, we'll get there. So I do think sometimes if you are doing this job, you can't shy away from doing what needs to be done to achieve the goal. You can't say, I'm not going to engage with that because I'm frightened of it. And if we are doing that, then we need to be honest with ourselves and say, maybe I'm shying away from it because I'm frightened. And there's nothing wrong with that. And how do we get away from being frightened? I remember a good friend of mine, Gillian Murray, talked once at a conference, and she said that in order to be the best practitioner that you can be, you need to have pillars around you. You need to have a content, you need to have access to the right education and knowledge. And it's all well and good having create a booklet of policies, but in that moment, you need to know what would you do. And I have a book here randomly. It's called What Would Kate Do? The girls named it, not me. But it was because I was spending more time out of the clinic. And I remember going through this moment of, they don't have the experience that I have. And if they face something, they come running for me. So what are they going to do when I'm not there? So together we did it over the course of a week when we opened after Christmas. And we looked at each individual presentation that we would get. And all of us put together a what would Kate do she? So how would it present? What are the initial things that we need to do? And I think we have a copy and paste mentality. We have great things that we laminate on top of our door because visually it looks like we're prepared. But if you've ever had to face a complication, which I have, in that moment, sometimes your head needs simplicity. It needs your words. And I think we have to engage with the fact that these are real risks. We can't hide from them, but we shouldn't be afraid of them because we are capable of addressing them. So I think it's a matter of just taking the time to truly understand the presentation and then put together the steps for you in your context. What I would do here with a team of other professionals and the support of a nurse and a plastic surgeon and a doctor is different to the sole practitioner who might be working isolated on their own. So we can both deal with the complication, but our processes will be different. So instead of hiding away and just hoping that day doesn't come and having a membership to CMAC or ACE and thinking when I need it, I'll ring. I think by doing that deep down, especially risk averse nurses, we know we're carrying that. So we have to, I think we just have to head on engage with it and put our books together, put our, what would I do in this case? What would I do here? And I think the process, it goes back to basic teaching. Copy and paste doesn't do anything. Students need to take it all in and then regurgitate it to show their understanding. And we have to do the same here. And there are some incredible learning resources out there. Even though Gillian is a friend of mine, I subscribe to her Patreon and I watch that because I still take gems away now and it changes my practice. And I think we just have to be continuously focused on that if we're going to be a safe practitioner.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I've definitely heard, probably over the last couple of years, an increase in people say to me, like when they come to work with me and we talk about their offering and what they do, I've definitely seen an increase in practitioners who are moving away from fillers because they're worried about reaction, what happen, especially if, like you say, they work on their own and they don't have a team around them and they're quite isolated. And they're worried about what if a complication happens, or what if they get a text message from a patient at 11 p.m. at night, or what if they go on holiday and someone has a complication. So yeah, I do think that's so
But if
important.
that's the case, what is your
Yeah.
process? I can remember a member of the Nurse Network contacting the page one evening. And I remember thinking, wow, that is it. The question we always get asked, people get asked is, I work in the NHS and I work in aesthetic medicine. And I always say the time will come when you need to make a decision. Now, that's my opinion. And to many, it's a wrong one, but that's mine. And I always think, I can remember being in hospital doing my masters and the clinic ringing me because one of the nurses who was working here at the time had someone have an anaphylaxis in the clinic, and she rang me and she said, I've done this, I've done that, I've done that, I've done this, what do I do? And in that moment, good, bad or indifferent, I left my placement. Now that, in that position, I was a student, so I could do that. But if I was a nurse who was on the ward responsible for patients, I can't do that. So what would you do? And that's fine if you can't, but you need to have a what would you do? Who would you call? You have to have that process. Because I've had nurses who contacted me and said, I'm just about to start a 14-hour shift and my patient's got levator reticularis. Okay, so what are you doing? Well, I'm ringing you. That's not enough. Where was your process? And I think we have to be honest about and have those conversations, because there's nothing wrong with being a sole practitioner. We all were. But you have to have that process. If you are going to still be in the NHS, and the reality is those are long, long shifts and we don't have our phones, where are your patients meant to go? And that's important. So I don't think you cannot have both. You absolutely can, but you need to be honest about those processes. If you're a safe practitioner, you need to have a plan B.
Can you give any tips to people for putting that process in place?
I think one thing I've seen in the time of having the nurses network is obviously we've got regional groups, and I'm privy to be on some of those groups that are in my geographical location, so I can support as and when. And one thing I've loved to see is on one of our groups recently, one of the members put a post up with a complication and the level of support that the team gave her. And it was her first complication, and one of the other members said, do you want me to come to your clinic and help you with it? And she was like, would you? And she was like, yes, two eyes are better than one. And that's what it's about. I think for a long time people used to shy away from engaging with their competition. It's not about competition, it's about collaboration. And when you work with the people around you, you can become better, you can become stronger. You don't have to have this wall up that it's like, stay away from me. It doesn't have to be like that. And that's one thing I've noticed in this region. They're all supporting each other. And that's what you need. You need that collaborative community that you can call on. And you can even refine that one step further. I have colleagues who are in my area that are a few miles away from me, and they'll ring me and I'll ring them. And that's how it should be. I'm lucky enough, obviously, I have got other nurses here, so I don't need necessarily to lean on people when I'm away. But I'm always saying to some of my colleagues, like, I will be that person for you. If you are away, direct your patients to me. No problem. I'm there to help. And I think you just need to find your people and put those processes in place. And maybe, take one day a quarter to kind of meet up and talk about it and work together collaboratively, get some case studies. I mean, me and Ellie, who works for me, I send Ellie case studies on a Friday night because we're that boring. I'm like, have you seen this? And she's like, yeah, what are your thoughts? And we bash it out. But I know not everyone's as pathetic as we are, but it's things like that. We learn from reviewing those case studies. So people should take the responsibility to create those learning opportunities for themselves. Meet up, bash out some case studies. What are your thoughts? Have you come across something? Or if someone's had a complication, get together and pick it out. What could I have done differently? What did I do right? How am I going to make sure this doesn't happen again? Or how am I going to make sure that if it does happen again, we respond much more efficiently? And that's the learning. If we were doing everything right all the time, where's the learning in that? So we should be empowered to share our mistakes because it's such an incredible learning experience for everybody else.
Yeah, oh, I love that. Yeah, community is so important, especially if you're working on your own. Yeah, it's nice to have those colleagues around you to lean on for support. I want to go back to like the early days of your clinic a little bit because obviously you came into aesthetics at quite a unique way. You didn't, like you say, you did other things before, you'd done a degree in other things, you'd had businesses, so you had a lot of knowledge and expertise in lots of different areas. How would you say that helped you build your clinic and get it to where it is today? And can you tell us a little bit about, how long it took you to get your clinic from where it was at the beginning to where it is now, and maybe some key things that you think have helped your clinic grow in the way that it has done?
I think in the early beginnings, a colleague of mine, Grace, said something once. She said, "You don't know what you don't know." And when I look back at the early beginnings of my career, I sometimes think, why did I do that? And I had a conversation with actually a friend of mine, Katja Patterson, and we said the same thing in the sense that, we all start somewhere. And I think at the beginning, I thought I was doing everything right. I think we all do. We've gone on this training course. We've been told this is that. We're inspired by that. And I think I very much hid. I think I felt the pressure at the beginning that I wasn't this decorated nurse of 20 years. And I felt, if I'm being honest, probably that I had to prove myself. But at the beginning, I didn't feel like that. At the beginning, I felt like I should hide. I didn't want people to judge me. I didn't want people to say, oh, who are you? You shouldn't be here. You came into it in a different way. And they're right. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. I'm a big girl and I can take it. I appreciate that the lack of my long decorated past in the NHS probably left me without that clinical knowledge that potentially they had. So it was my responsibility to get it. I looked at where I was and my weaknesses or my areas that I needed to develop, and I wholeheartedly engulfed it. I remember a friend of mine is a rhinologist and endoscopic brain surgeon. And I remember going and saying, can I just come and live with you for a bit in the hospital? And every bit of free time that I had, I went and leaned on my colleagues, my plastic surgery friends, my friends in the industry. I remember sitting there and observing for ACP friends while they did GP consultations. And that was outside of my master's. I did everything I could to learn as much as I could. I always was self-critical. I evaluated what I did and I made it better. I wanted to have a CQC facility because I wanted people to know I was doing things right. I wanted to continuously learn because I wanted people to know. And that was the driving force at the beginning. I don't do it for that now. I've realized you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to be able to sit there every single day, look at yourself in the mirror and go, I know I do things right. If I could say anything to anyone is, don't do that. That was a whole wasted lot of energy that I spent trying to appease people that respectfully didn't matter. If I'm being honest, what matters is what I do day in, day out and the application of that. And I've surrounded myself now with the most incredible peers, that I am inspired by and I'm in awe of every day, like the nurse that I see in cardiology. And it's about surrounding yourself with better. It's about sitting there and taking all that energy and all that time and becoming better. And part of that is understanding your weaknesses and addressing them. You know, I did my bachelor's, I did my postgrad education in Manchester Uni. I did my master's at Canterbury University, and then I went and did my prescribing at Kent University, and putting together now a PhD submission. And not because I've got anything to prove anymore, because at one point that was my driving force, because I want to do it, because I want to be better. And I just think if you're starting out, just appreciate that not everyone is where they want to be straight away, and that's okay. But if I probably took those doors down earlier on, my trajectory probably would have been quicker. That being said, though, you know, I'm very proud of what I've built. We've been in this building nearly five years, I think, this year. And, you know, we've built an incredible reputation. You know, I've worked with some incredible organizations, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that continuously come my way. And I take them very serious every single time. And I try and never get ahead of myself. I'm incredibly humble for every opportunity, incredibly grateful. But I will say that my background, when people say to me, oh, that was a bit weird, I go, it wasn't. And if anything, I'm incredibly grateful for my journey, because my ability to teach is because of my skills, whether that be my degree in teaching or the 1 year where I did my qualified teacher status with the Department of Education, or whether that was the years I spent designing training modules, looking after children year in, year out. Whatever it is, it's made me a better teacher. Whatever skills when I did my degree has passed on to help me write these publications. And my business skills from my early years have allowed me now to be successfully running 5 businesses, albeit with a lot of grey hairs. But I love my life, and no one's giving it to me. I've created it. So if people say to me, oh, it was a little bit of a weird entrance, to me, it's incredibly organic. And I'm very lucky that I've been able to do it. And I think business is business. We don't want to call this a business because we shouldn't do that. It is a business. The more money that we can make, the more people we can help. Our stuff that we do with our botch clinics, we don't make money from that. Last year, it cost me nearly £40,000 on my bottom line to do it. But that doesn't bother me because the successes elsewhere allow me to be able to do that. So, you know, it's just about knowing your numbers.
Yeah, no, I love your journey. I love the fact that it's so unique, and I think it's helped you get to where you are today, and it's helped you to be the practitioner that you are and to do all of the things that you do. What about in the early days when you were trying to get patients through the door and you hadn't, you were very new business? What was it that you did to help kind of get your name out there?
I think what I've always tried to do is think about the rationale behind the decisions that we make. So when I see people who've just started out, they're very they're very keen to shout to everyone that they've just started. My dad was in business, and my dad always used to say to me, from, oh my God, my first ever business, and I went in to meet some of the directors, and I was like 18, and I literally had about £300 to my name. And I remember asking my dad to help me buy a suit. Oh my God, you should have seen this suit, Emily. It was absolutely appalling. It was like this horrendous pinstriped, horrendous suit. I think it was from somewhere like Mark One. You're probably too young to remember what Mark One was, but it was not attractive. It was the worst. I remember saying, why do I need a suit? And he said to me, you need a suit because you always need to present not the person you are, but the person you want to be. And that is really controversial because a lot of people will see that as arrogance. A lot of people will see that as you're ahead of yourself. But I don't think it is like that. If I continuously told all those kids that I taught, this is what you are, you can't do this, you're not capable of doing that, or know your place, you're just a nurse, you sit there. That's not what I'm ever going to say. I never told my students what to do or how to interpret something. I told them where to look. And then whatever they took from that, they should be inspired by that. We are not formulaic repetitions of each other. We are all different, and we should be allowed to celebrate those individual differences. And I think every individual brings something new, which is why we have a multidisciplinary team in the first place, because we all bring our different contexts and experiences and knowledge. And I think we should be inspired by who we are and not afraid to share who we are in our journeys. But I do think we need to also have a little bit more confidence. When I see people starting out, some people have been practicing for a year and a half and they still don't have a social media page because they're worried about what other people think. They're worried that their friends in the NHS will think they've gone to the dark side. They're worried that their family will think, why are you leaving medicine to go to aesthetics? They think it's a beauty industry. And I think if we don't believe in ourselves, how on earth do you expect anyone else to? So I always say, I'm not arrogant. I'm incredibly humble and I can list my faults longer than anyone else can. One thing I am is I know I can do anything I want. And I will not stop until I achieve it, because failure is only when you stop trying. And I have failed more times than anyone else, but I'm not afraid of failing. So I'll keep going. I'll be the annoying person in the room because I'm not going away. And I think people just need to have a little bit more resilience, and they have to be empowered and inspired to go, this is me, deal with it. And now, and then you can go on your journey where you refine that process. Have I always felt like that? No, I've battled with that sense of identity in this industry for a long time. But now I look back and all that wasted energy. People probably didn't think I was that I felt like that because I still probably came across really confident. But inside I was. So I think the key is from that very early beginnings, decide who you want to be, what is going to be your niche. I decided when I was doing my master's, second year, I made a decision. I'm not going to work in the NHS, but I'm still very much going to maintain being a nurse, but I'm going to do it on my own terms. I'm going to do it without the restraints and the red tape. Well, not the red tape, because that suggests I'm going rogue. What I mean is the restrictions. I can make decisions here that might not be a good business one, but I can do it anyway. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the freedom to be able to act. If a patient needed something, I wanted to be able to do it. If someone needs me, I want to be there. End of. And I get to do that. And I think you need to find out what your niche is. If you're a midwife and you want to go into private midwifery, you want to offer those services that are within your niche area, do it. What's stopping you? You don't have to fit this pigeonhole of this ideology person of this is what someone in aesthetic medicine looks like. No, no, no. We can make that decision ourselves as long as we're safe and we're compliant and we're always putting patients first. And I think we need to be inspired by that. We should be authentic. We should be individual. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love what you said as well about people having that kind of, I think imposter syndrome is probably the word to use when they're leaving the NHS. And like you say, they want to hide the fact they're going into aesthetics because they think people are going to frown upon it and, look at them differently. And I've even heard nurses say to me that people have said to them, oh, you're not a nurse anymore now, you're doing aesthetics. I think that's crazy. And I've had friends say to me when I've talked about people I've worked with, I say, oh, but they're not medical then. They're not medical if they're working in aesthetics. Like people don't really understand that is a medical specialty and you don't just become an aesthetic nurse, you become a nurse and then you specialise in aesthetics.
But I do think it also comes into play on there because people leave the NHS and I think a lot of practitioners do leave their nursing skills behind. And what I try and say to people, that's you, that's your skill. Why are you leaving it behind? When we look at the services that I offer here, a lot of it is like blood testing, wellness services, sexual health clinics, pre and post surgical care, emergency care, the list goes on, even down to IVs and medication. We even support dermatologists. We get referrals from 6 different primary care places. At the end of the day, you can decide what you want to be and you can bring all that in. There's nothing wrong with that. I think people go, oh, I think somebody said to me once, oh, I don't want to do that because then it will take away from what I'm doing with aesthetics. No, it won't. That's the marketing of it. And that's where you need to be skilled. But you can do that. If COVID taught us anything, it's that we need alternate sources of income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And what about, we've probably touched on quite a lot of this, but what about the tougher side of the industry? So there's often a lot of glamour associated with aesthetics on social media, but behind the scenes, it is quite a tough industry. What's something about working in aesthetics that you think people perhaps don't talk about enough?
I think where there is money, there are often problems. And I think it can bring out a sense of competition, and it shouldn't. When we moved into our new building, I can remember about a year into having this new building, I had a call from the NMC saying, we just wanted to make you aware that someone's put a complaint in for professional conduct. I was like, okay. And we just want to make you aware that we've done a full investigation. It's not going any further, but we just wanted to make you aware. I went, okay. May I ask on what grounds? Well, apparently you put a video up on your social media of you setting fire to a nursing tunic. So I said, okay. I said, can I just ask on what benefit that would have ever done to my business? Me setting fire to a nursing tunic. Well, we can't find the video. I was like, because it doesn't exist. And it didn't go anywhere. It literally had gone nowhere because it didn't exist. But after that, over the course of the next few weeks, I was getting multiple calls from people who I was in business with to tell me that a certain person had been in touch with them to say to not deal with me, had said that I was pretending to be a doctor. Everywhere you look on my social media website, it clearly says we're a nurse-led facility. So I couldn't understand it. And then in the end, I ended up getting in touch with the police because I received a message at 11 o'clock at night, someone who did aesthetic medicine near me. And he said that he was going to ruin my life, that in an interview I had said, I'm finished my master's. The question was, what's next? And I'd replied, I'm very much looking forward to doing my PhD. And he said that I was trying to pretend I was a doctor. And that's my goal for being a PhD. And he was going to do what he could to ruin me. So in the end, I rang the police because it was very threatening. And I was a bit worried, to be honest. And he was arrested because they did an investigation. And it turned out this particular person had been following me, taking pictures of me for a course of about 15 months, and had actually done a lot more than that. I had contacted other companies that I didn't know about and was conspiring with another practitioner, a nurse who, again, was another competitor. And in the end, they said, he has been arrested. We arrested him this morning in front of his wife and children, which made me feel awful. And he said, what do you want to do next? And I said, leave it. And he said, why? And I went, I'm hoping this has been enough for him to realise he's made a mistake. And I could have reported him to the GMC, but I didn't. I made a decision in that moment that I didn't want to engage with it. And I was hoping that the process of my response and the way I responded, I've got nothing to hide. Anyone could come in here, they can live here if they want. I've got nothing to hide. And actually, to go to that level of extent because someone moved in a few miles away from you, to threaten them, to contact people they're in business with, to make their life absolute hell for 6 months. People ask me why we've got an electromagnetic security door and cameras all around here. And that's the reason. Because I was thinking, this person's been taking pictures of me for 15 months with my child in a park, walking around. And I'm thinking, for what? For what? Now, at the time, I remember thinking, as you do in those moments, you go, what's the point? This is ridiculous. I'm coming out of it. And then I try and empathize. This person had his business for a long time. I've moved in here, multiple practitioners. It's probably had an impact. But then I sit there and go, but that's business. I couldn't even, Emily, tell you anyone around here and what they're doing. I'm not looking. I'm only focused on what I'm doing and how I can make it better. If you had a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you a business in my proximity, apart from the friends I know. So it was a really emotional time, but it did teach me something because he was looking. He'd been looking for 15 months. He was digging. He found nothing. And the reason he found nothing is because I work hard to do things right. But in that moment, I remember thinking, if I wasn't CQC regulated, if I didn't have everything in place, if I wasn't watching what the girls did, if I was cutting corners, if I wasn't doing this, that would have been the end of me. All it did was prove to me that I'm doing things right. When people say to me, what's the benefit of regulating yourself when at the moment we don't need to be regulated? That's the benefit. Are you not worried about people having to come for a consultation and making them go away before they can book a procedure? No, that's our policy. You have a consultation, you go away, you reflect on the risk, and you come back. Does that mean I potentially lose that patient? Maybe, but I'm doing things right. And you know what? It doesn't impact us. So I think it's about having faith in your procedures and doing things right day in, day out, and knowing that that's the right thing to do. And it was a very hard time going through that. And I've never even discussed it before. It's the first time I've ever discussed it outside of friends of mine. And it's not something that impacts me. And I've definitely moved on from it. But I share it with the sense of you will always be met with hesitation. And I think as you advance in this industry and you grow, or you put your face out there, you have to be ready for people to comment. And if you're not, then don't do it. Because I think if you are going to not elevate your status, that's the wrong way of saying it, but if you're going to put your head out there in a position where people can comment, you have to be okay with what they're going to say. So you better be ready for that. And that's all I would say. And I'm glad to say those things don't happen anymore. I think it's that transitional period when you're growing and people don't particularly like it. But don't engage with it. Put every drop of energy you can into being the best practitioner, regulate yourself, and just run your business in the highest and the best way that you can. And that's the best advice I give anyone. Of course,
Yeah, and you're doing everything right. Yeah.
absolutely.
That was an incredibly scary thing for you to go through though with,
Yeah, it wasn't
yeah,
nice.
on the
It wasn't
road,
nice.
and I'm really sorry that that happened to you. Obviously, a very extreme example of, yeah, what can happen.
And sad, really, because I actually believe wholeheartedly that, and I'm probably being pathetic and using my nursey empathy here, but I actually believe in his head. When the police were questioned and he said, why? He said, oh, because my friend said we should do it. And it didn't mean to go this far. We were just trying to get her to move. We just didn't want her to be there. And I genuinely believe that in his head, he didn't realise the impact that he was having. He even said to me, I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to destroy you. And I remember thinking, like a proper child, my inner child was going, why is he being so mean? Why? And then you get sit there and go, do you know what? It is what it is, just learn from it, move on. And I know colleagues who've had similar situations, maybe not extreme, some more extreme. But the point of the matter is business. And the bigger your business goes, the more barriers that you'll face. Only way you get through them is by making sure you have everything cross dotted and you have that support system in place to ride those waves. Things aren't always going to be easy. And that's fine. But from every experience you go through, you learn something and you evolve and you become better. And so I'm incredibly grateful, as crazy as that sounds, even for that experience, because I became better. And maybe I'm now more conscious about the responses that I make sure people never misunderstand what I'm trying to say, or just things like that. I think you evolve and you get, these things can have a positive impact if you let them.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give to practitioners who want to build a sustainable, patient focused business but perhaps feel overwhelmed by the pressures of competition around them and social media and the fact that like you say, they're putting their face out there, people are going to look at you, people might judge you, and if they feel put off by that, what has kind of helped you over the years?
I think it stems from actually just being confident in what you want to do. And if you want something enough, you've got to go for it. When I was 18 and told my dad I was going to buy a recruitment company, he said to me, you're ridiculous. And he was laughing. He didn't mean it. He was always very supportive of everything I said. But not everyone has people around them who continuously believe in them. And I'm very lucky because both my parents were both in business, and both of them continuously said to me from day dot, you can do anything. And I've always believed that, but I'm very aware that not everyone has that voice. Perhaps they've had to be that voice for themselves. And I just think surround yourself with great people. Our company has a massive impact on our mindset. You surround yourself with high performers, you're likely to perform 30-40% higher than most. And I think surround yourself with great people, but also just decide from a very early on, take the time on your own. You don't need to discuss it with anyone. It's why you're asking people's opinions. At this moment, you don't need to do that. Get a pen and paper, pour yourself a glass of wine or a hot chocolate, whatever you want to do, sit there on your own with your head and decide what you want that business to be. And if you completely believe in that, get your head down and do it. I think a lot of the time people, they have an idea, they discuss it with someone, but then what people forget is sometimes people's opinions, they bring their context to that opinion. Like if I said to my husband, oh my God, I've been given a great opportunity to go and work in China for the next year. That could be the best opportunity I ever get in a million years. His answer is probably not going to be, you should do that, Kate. That's great. Because his context, how it impacts him, will come into that. People need to understand that when they're discussing the situations or when they want to do something. Sometimes, yes, it's great to discuss it. Sometimes if you discuss it with the wrong people, they'll sit there and go, that's a ridiculous idea. Why are you doing that? And then that can have a negative impact. So my advice is get your head down, decide what you want to build and build it. Surround yourself with people who believe in what you're going to achieve. And that's it. I always say you can't make traction if one of your legs is going left and the other one's going right. You can't fully embrace a business if 90% of you still doesn't believe in it. And you can't ever grow a business if people don't trust you, and they're not going to trust you unless they see you. So you need to be using your website and your platforms to share that. That's part of the parcel. So when people go, I've had my business, it's not really growing anywhere, I might leave it. I can look at their Instagram and Facebook in 30 seconds and tell them why it's not going somewhere. But they don't want to make that extra step because in their head, what if it doesn't work out? You've got to have faith. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. You know, my mum always had a saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we've got to be real with what that entails. If you think going into aesthetic means you're going to have more free time, no. It will give you more freedom and more autonomy. If you think running a business is going to make you rich, not so much if you do things right. It's about real talk. And the problem is when you see a lot of training academies going, come and train with me, you'll be on 6 figures in 6 months. Come on. That's not real. Stop selling them a pipe dream. Come and do this. You'll have more time with your children. I went back to work 6 weeks after I gave birth to my daughter. No maternity leave for me. So let's be real, put it all out there. This is what it is, but this is what it can do. I love my life. I get up every day happy and inspired. I love it. I get to do what I want, surround myself with absolute winners, and I absolutely adore it. It has its bad days, but I love it. When I look back in my previous life, for lack of a better expression, there were days when I used to sit and think, oh, right, okay, well, I've used this excuse. What else can I do how can I get a bit of time off? Can I go on sabbatical? What can I do? Because you're not happy. You're not inspired. You know, I come in every day and I'm giving myself additional things to do. And people go, why? Because I want to, because it's fun and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's important as well about the training academies, because it's like you can give someone the skills to go out and be a great aesthetic practitioner, but there's a lot more to it than that. At the end of the day, it's a business. You've got to get people through the door. You've got to be putting yourself out there. It's hard graft.
I'm consistently doing it.
And consistency, yeah, and it's going to be years, not, months to get there. Okay, I want to talk about the Nurses Network a little bit because I can't believe we've got this far into the podcast and I think we've mentioned it, but we've not really touched on it too much. But as we kind of wind down the podcast, let's talk a little bit about the Nurses Network, which, for anyone listening who doesn't know, is an organisation dedicated to supporting medical practitioners in aesthetics. What inspired you to create this community?
I used to do some training for Teoxane, and one thing, when I did training in my own clinic, it was always nurses that used to come because nurses used to come to nurses. When I used to do training for Teoxane, it was different. It was everyone, doctors, dentists, nurses. And one thing I realised was after every single training day, when it all dies down, people hover at the end. And by the way, anyone listening to this isn't a negative. I'm just painting a picture. And they want to talk to you, which is fine. That's why you're there. But what they want to ask you is usually nothing to do with the training day. And it's things like, how did you do this? You mentioned this. Where did you get them from? How did you get that? How did you bring that service in? And I remember thinking, these people have been, in my eyes, if I was to look from an outside in, I'd say them as far more established in the industry than I was. So what's different? And actually, we started about 4 years ago. We stopped doing training as one-day courses in my clinic, and we started doing mentoring. So basically, nurses would move in from anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. And the point was that they were here 1 day a week and they would learn the ins and the outs, the good, the bad, the ugly, the complications, the graphs, the complaints, the procedures, the audits, the ins and outs. But with each opportunity that arisen, they would learn from it. And in addition to that, they would obviously get the qualification. We still do that now. But what I realized was these students that left me after 12 months, they were so much more resilient, so much more aware because they'd been mentored, because they had someone or multiple people, whatever, talking to them and guiding them and holding their hand and giving them autonomy. And I tell you what I'm going to do. You're really good at doing that now. I want you to consult with that patient. You go do it. You go do it. I don't want to do it. Go do it. I'm going to do a skin scan. You do it. I don't want to do it. You go do it. And over the course of that year, they just became a practitioner now who could deal with things professionally, who could assess and consult effectively. And I remember thinking, I need to do this on a bigger scale. Like, we need to do this on a big scale. And someone got in touch with me about doing a TV production thing. So I kind of went up to London, met with them. And at this TV production thing, I bumped into loads of other professionals. Some I knew, some I didn't. And I connected with Grace and Megan at this event. And we decided not to pursue this media opportunity because it was very clear that it was going to be quite controversial. And not in a bad way, there's nothing wrong with it. But professionally, I didn't feel that it fitted in with what I wanted to do at that point. And I wasn't on a gun-ho mission to put the world right in that respect. So we walked, but we kept in touch and we talked about actually what the industry needed. And through the discussions that we were having within that other sector, we were all like fueled by it. So we decided to do it. And we had no idea. Like, we were just, the point of it was, the goal was never to be like other people go, oh, are you trying to be like the BACN or Batman now? It's like, no, 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 no. They're amazing. Everyone should have a membership with mine. What they do is incredible. They're strategic. They're working where it matters. But what we realized was there was a gap for people who were either at the early beginnings and not established, or people who had lost their way a little bit, or had lost, come back from maternity, whatever it is. There was a cohort of people who perhaps didn't want to engage with the latter, or but didn't feel confident enough to share or whatever, because they were dealing with the early stages and that they needed a mentor. And we wanted to try and see if we could do that. And one of the things that we discussed was, the more established that you are in this industry, the better perks you get. The more buying power you've got, the more benefits that you can receive. And actually, when you've got more buying power, you've got more budget. But actually, at the beginning, money is something you don't have. So how can we make this technology, these machines, accessible? How can we make them access discounts on products they're using day in, day out? How can we help them get a cheaper bed for their room, a cheaper medical fridge? How do we get them to go on training that they can access a little bit cheaper? What can we do? And that's what we did. So, we've created a community which is aimed around being supportive and fun, which is meant to inspire and engage, where people can come together and share and laugh and learn from each other, a safe space that people can be a beginner. And in addition to that community is the networking opportunities. So we have the big events. We've got one coming obviously soon. We usually have one around May. Then we have a Christmas party, because again, from feedback from nurses, they said when they leave the NHS, they lose that. So let's have a TNN Christmas party every year. We're all together and we'll celebrate that. The other thing, I know it's silly, but a lot of nurses, they have plain scrubs because they don't want to put their brand on it because they still feel they're not a brand, they're not a part of something. So we created TNN scrubs so they could all feel like they're part of something bigger. So it was just about helping people in that growing phase, whether it was business support, mentoring, regional meets, whatever it was. But it was about providing access and about signposting. Where do I go for this? Here. Where's reputable? Where's not? The amount of nurses that I know who go and they feel stupid for asking, but they'll go, "Oh, I've just had an email from a manufacturer of products in Korea, and he says he can come and drop me off some boxes of Juvederm really cheap. What do you think?" People will go, "Are they stupid? They're obviously dodgy products, but they're not stupid. They don't know. They're new." So instead of attacking, explain. And that's what we wanted to do. So we were trying to provide that guidance without judgment and say, here's the support you need, and let's help you get that traction and grow. And we do that in many ways. But we're very, very proud of what we've got. We've got a following on socials now of nearly 13,000 nurses, a lot of them randomly as well from the States and Australia, which is great. We've got member platform that's growing by the day, which is fantastic. We've got regional lead in every part of the UK supporting our group. So, we've really only been doing it for 18 months, but the amount that we've grown in 18 months just justified that clearly there's a place. So we just want to make sure we can be that role to who needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it goes back to that community that we talked about earlier and just that sense of belonging somewhere, which can really make all the difference, I think, to your confidence and how you conduct yourself and show up in business because you feel empowered by the people that you've got around you. Yeah, so I think that's really, really important. And you also touched on mentorships. Do you still offer mentorship programs for?
Yeah, so we do. Our last cohort of students left us in January, so we'll probably be looking at advertising spaces again for sort of April. That's in my practice. Obviously, a lot of what I do is I do a lot of talks elsewhere now, so I'm not in the clinic as much as I used to be. I used to be in here 7 days a week. At the moment, it's more 4 or 5 days a week, and the other times I'm flying here, there, and everywhere, which is unbelievable. I'm incredibly grateful. Last year was a great year for me in terms of speaking globally. I felt really kind of empowered to share that with a lot of our nurses because I know a lot of nurses are worried about going up and putting themselves out there. But last year I had the opportunity to speak in Athens, Istanbul, China, Italy, and this year's already kicked off with a bang. So it's, if I can do anything really with my role, it's just to kind of I want the nurse who feels like she doesn't fit in or the nurse who's scared to take that step forward, just to believe in herself a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. And I have to ask as well before we kind of wrap up, because obviously patient safety is at the heart of all everything that you do, and with your botch clinics, and for practitioners who want to make safety a bigger priority in their clinic, what steps should they take? What would you say is the most important things they can do now?
I think you need to register with somebody. I think a lot of people are asking where I want to regulate my clinic, and I think it's important to do that. I think the process of becoming regulated in terms of whether that's CQC, registering with Save Face, whatever it may be, I think it's a step that's necessary because the process of it, you'll learn so much, even just getting things into play. And it'll also inspire you because you'll realize that a lot of what you're doing is right, but you'll get a few tips to tighten things up, which I think is really, really important. And then I think share your learning and share, the complications that you get. I think we see a lot of patients day in, day out. If I do a combination therapy, I write it up and I publish it. If I have had a complication, I share it. I do a webinar on it. If everything that we come across, people can learn from it. And I think we just need to get more in the habit of collaborating and sharing those experiences because that's how we can learn from each other. So, just make a dedication to doing that. Set yourself a goal to do that. And I think people just need to engage more with their self development. And that doesn't mean the curse of overtraining. A lot of people continuously go on training courses because they think that's what they need to do. I think we just need to allocate a certain amount of times per week to our own development, whether that be a patient, whether that be looking at case studies, whether that be reviewing a complication or an issue or a complaint or a process or an incident in your own clinic. What happened? How can I make sure that doesn't happen again? All that is valuable learning, and we don't do enough of that. You know, we disregard it, we put it under bed, we focus on things that are more important. But I think we need to allocate that time to that self-development. And that doesn't always have to cost money. You know, I think a lot of people go, I haven't got the money for that. I'm early beginners. It doesn't cost money to review a clinical study. It doesn't cost money to review a guideline for complications, but the learning that you get from it is important. And that is all we do when we're at university, is regurgitate and analyze documents and information. We just need to be more autonomous, I think, in our own development.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing advice. And for practitioners who are kind of just starting out in aesthetics at the very early stage of their kind of aesthetics career, what one piece of advice do you wish you'd known when you were right at the beginning?
If I'm honest, I think my personal one would be stop trying to be somebody I'm not. I think we all have imposter syndrome when we do something new. First day at school, first day at uni, first day at a new job, we're all the same. And so, you know, psychologically, some people have a need to just try and fit in. But I think just be yourself and be the best version of you. I think sometimes, you know, for a long time, I try and be someone who I thought people wanted. Not, it sounds awful, but trying to be the practitioner that I wanted, other people wanted me to be. But actually, I know the practitioner I want to be, and I need to do that and be empowered by that journey. So be informed, align yourself with the right people, and just continuously work on yourself.
Yeah, amazing advice. Oh, I've loved this chat. This has been amazing. And I think people will take so much away from it. So thank you so
You're
much for
welcome.
coming on. And for anyone listening who wants to connect with you or wants to find out more about the Nurses Network, where's the best place for them to go now?
Like always on everything, I've got eyes everywhere. So you can either message the Nurses Network on Instagram, or you can message the clinic by La Ross. Either one is fine. Reach out, no problem.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
No problem.